start very quickly by simply answering the question why. Okay, why methane? Why the oil and gas industry? And why me? Right? Methane, as it noted, is a very powerful greenhouse gas, many more times more powerful than carbon dioxide. Doesn't last in the atmosphere nearly as long. But for the time that it is in the atmosphere, it is much more effective at trapping the Earth's heat than carbon dioxide. In fact, according to the IPCC, 25% of the warming that our planet is experiencing right now is associated with methane emissions. If you want to slow the rate of warming, you reduce methane emissions. If you want to reduce the total amount of warming that our planet will see over time, you want to continue to focus on reducing carbon dioxide. One of the things that we've learned over the last several years is an effective climate strategy needs to do both things. Reduce the total amount of warming that we will experience and reduce the rate of warming. And that's why methane. Why the oil and gas industry? Well, the oil and gas industry is one of the largest sources of methane on the planet. Behind only agriculture globally, but in the United States, the oil and gas industry is in fact the largest source of methane emissions, man-made methane emissions, period. So there's a tremendous challenge here for the industry, but also a tremendous opportunity for the industry to make a very significant contribution to reducing climate change simply by taking care of this problem. Okay? And why me? Well, because the Environmental Defense Fund has been working on this issue for close to 5 years now, both doing work to better understand the scope of emissions. We have facilitated 16 different field studies looking at methane emissions across the oil and gas supply chain, from the well site, gathering and processing, transmission and storage, local distribution, even natural gas vehicles. And so we spent a lot of time studying the issue to better understand the magnitude of it, as well as understanding where the opportunities are to make cost-effective reductions. And in fact, we've been doing this in partnership with a number of research universities across the U.S. and many companies in the industry itself, including many Canadian companies, TransCanada, Encana, Shell, right, have all been part of this work that we have done to better understand the problem and the opportunities for reductions. So why me? Because I get an opportunity to represent what we've learned from that work and talk a little bit about its significance here in Canada and what it means globally. And of course, it is appropriate that we're here in Alberta talking about this issue because of the leadership that the current government of Alberta has shown in addressing this issue. The government understands very clearly what I was just explaining. That is, a comprehensive strategy to address climate change is not just about reducing CO2, although that is incredibly important, but it's also about addressing methane emissions, which pertain to the rate of warming, and a very clear understanding that as one of the world's leaders in oil and gas production, as Alberta is, it takes a special responsibility on the part of the province to show the way in addressing this issue. And in fact, Premier Nutley is to be congratulated for the leadership that the province has shown, and the commitment that Alberta has made to reduce oil and gas methane emissions here in the province by 45% by 2025. And Alberta's leadership is getting real results. I do not believe that the federal government would have made the commitment to reduce emissions by 45% across Canada had Alberta not made the decision to lead. And I can also tell you that the fact that both Alberta and the federal government here in Canada chose to act, frankly, put pressure on the US administration to finally commit to regulating methane emissions from existing oil and gas sources in the United States. So although the US may have been first to understand that this was a challenge, frankly, it was the leadership of Canada which really called the US to account and led to the US making the commitment to regulate existing sources. So thank you for that. Now, okay, but also applaud the fact that because of that leadership, right, Mexico in June, in meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau and President Obama, joined Canada and the United States in making a similar commitment to address oil and gas methane emissions in Mexico by 45%. And this is incredibly important because Mexico, as many of you know, is in the process of a very significant set of reforms for its energy industry. Right? There is a concerted effort on the part of Mexico to modernize its industry, to invite foreign investment in its industry, which is a big change for that country, right? And President Nieto, I think, understood very clearly that modernization and foreign investment also require significant attention to the environment. And so Mexico's commitment to address these emissions is also to be applauded. And just to give you a sense as to what this all adds up to, the three countries of North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, together represent roughly 20% of global oil and gas methane emissions. So while we won't fully address this problem until we have other major oil and gas producing nations engaged, the fact that North America, which is responsible for 20% of these emissions, is now on a path to actually do something significant is truly remarkable. And it started with Alberta. The challenge ahead, of course, is to take that commitment now and translate it into regulatory action. The importance of moving forward in a regulatory way is underscored by the fact that the industry for many years has been emitting methane, but with modest progress in terms of making actual reductions. Okay? What we're looking for here is not regulation for regulation's sake, but what we're looking for is good, smart, targeted, and efficient regulations. Right? And what we're looking for here in the United States, as in Canada, is not a one-size-fits-all approach imposed by a federal government, but by a set of approaches that take the best of what both states and provinces could do and what the federal government could do, and to do it in a coordinated way. Why has it taken so long to address this issue? Well, the fundamental truth about methane is that it basically is invisible, right? You can't see it, you can't smell it unless you scent it. You can't taste it. And so methane is a classic example of an environmental problem that fits the adage that you can't manage what you don't measure. Here is a slide here that shows on the, I guess on your right, or your left, right? That's the gas storage field as seen by the naked eye. And next to it is that same gas storage field, but using an infrared camera that's capable of seeing the gas that's escaping from the storage tanks. Okay. So unless you have reason to go out and survey your facilities for methane emissions, this is something that is going to escape your attention, whether you're a facility manager, whether you're a VP of operations, or whether you're a CEO. Okay. What we've learned from our studies, from our field studies, is not only that this problem exists, but we've also learned a great deal about the steps that can be taken to make significant reductions. I see we in Pembina asked ICF to do a study in Canada which shows where emissions are coming from. And the Canadian experience is very similar to the US experience in Mexico. We've done studies in each one of those countries, right? And we've learned that we can get a 45% reduction of emissions here in Canada for roughly $2.70 per ton of CO2e reduced. This is incredibly cost-effective carbon reductions that are there to be had. And as you can see from this pie chart, it really breaks down to a couple of very simple things, to tell you the truth, right? Maintenance of compressors, replacing pneumatics that operate by actuating on differential gas pressure with pneumatics valves that operate either on compressed air or electrically, vapor recovery systems on tanks, and the vast majority of emissions can be addressed simply by reducing the amount that's vented and the amount that's leaked. And here are, a pictorial example of the kinds of technologies we're talking about. In fact, what we've learned through our experience is that the vast majority of emissions actually are coming from venting and leaks. And that is a relatively small number of sources that are responsible for the lion's share of emissions, whether you're talking about well sites, gathering and processing facilities, transmission and storage, or local distribution. And it's one of the reasons, therefore, why regulators in the United States have been so focused on leak detection and repair as an essential strategy for addressing emissions from the oil and gas sector. Because what we have found is that if we regularly go out and survey sites, there's much that can be done to reduce emissions significantly and very cost effectively. Colorado is the first state anywhere in North America to implement comprehensive methane control regulations. And what they have learned in Colorado from that experience, and those regulations have been in effect for about a year and a half, is that 80% of the leaks that were identified through their inspection requirement could be repaired on site by the inspector with a wrench. 20% of those leaks required a service ticket to have a repair guy come out, and those could be fixed usually within 2 or 3 days. Right? This is not rocket science, folks. This is auto mechanics. Okay. But again, unless you have a requirement that people go out and systematically survey their sites periodically, right, you don't get at this. And the reason why you need to do it systematically and periodically is because, as with any mechanical system, things fail. Things malfunction, right? And you can't necessarily predict when or where that's going to happen. And so therefore, the only way to make sure that you're staying on top of this situation and not letting it fester and grow is if you periodically do this inspection and maintenance, right? And that's incredibly important. I should also say that, I should also mention that one of the other things that we've been learning from the work that we've been doing in the US is that addressing methane emissions is good business, right? Not only does this give industry more gas to then sell, and even at today's low gas prices, it's worth something, right? But it's also economic opportunity for the manufacturers of those new valves, for the manufacturers of those new compressors. There's a company here, there's a company in Edmonton, right, that has deployed over 300 non-emitting solar electric well control systems for well sites in Canada. And now we're talking about a North American market for that kind of innovation, right? So this can be good for business as well as good for the environment. And this is not just something that's happening in politically progressive places, right? I don't know how many of you have ever visited Wyoming, but Wyoming is the most Republican state in the United States, right? That's what the voting records show. More conservative than Alberta. Whoa. Okay. Wyoming has acted to address this issue. Now, in the case of Wyoming, right, the primary driver was air quality. Right? When methane is escaping from well sites, it's often accompanied by other pollutants that affect local air quality. There are periods of time in Wyoming where air quality in the gas production fields is as bad as Los Angeles. And that's a problem that even a conservative governor has to respond to, because people in Wyoming, I think like people in Alberta, right, appreciate the quality of the environment they have, right, want clean air. And so Wyoming has taken steps to reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas industry, motivated primarily because of concerns over clean air. Right? But it's all by way of saying that when you take steps to address this important climate pollutant, you're also doing very good things for your local environment as well. And I think that's important, particularly for local communities that have been so burdened by oil and gas activity for so long. And so what you're seeing in the United States is you're seeing slowly but surely oil and gas producing states across the U.S. are taking action. And of course, as I mentioned now, the federal government is taking action. So this is something that is happening in the U.S. Okay? And it began, right, with some of the work that we did, and frankly, some of the work that you and Alberta have done. Right, the leadership that you have shown, right? And what I'm confident about is that the relationship that has been built between the U.S. and Canada, and now the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, right, is going to lead to a North American oil and gas industry that is essentially going to set the standard for the rest of the world. And I think appropriately so, right? I think oil and gas producers elsewhere look to North America for technological leadership. And that technological leadership should be about more than just production, but also be about environmental performance. So, in conclusion, let me just put Alberta's commitment into perspective now that we're talking about the global scene, right? Alberta is committed to a 45% reduction in oil and gas methane emissions by 2025. Right? If that commitment were replicated globally, if the global oil and gas industry were able to achieve a 45% reduction by 2025, that would have the same impact on the climate over 20 years as closing 1/3 of the world's coal-fired power plants, right? Over 1,000 coal-fired power plants. For $2.50 per unit of CO2e reduced, that's an incredible bargain. And so, on behalf of those of us in the US, thank you for starting this movement.